In a relationship, when is honesty not the best policy? How do you balance what you want versus what you need? And is there something you need to say to your spouse, but can't find the right way to say it? If so, then you're in the right place. This is the Lunch with Sandy podcast. With nearly 20 years of marriage under their belts, Terrance and Sandy Jackson discuss a range of topics, provide valuable insights on relationships, and talk about the conversations married couples need to have. So what does lunch have to do with all of this? Well, it's a metaphor for how these conversations originally started. Speaking of conversations, let's get one going. Here's your hosts, Terrance and Sandy.
Welcome to another episode of the Lunch with Sandy podcast, where we discuss various topics and provide insights from the perspective of a married couple. I'm Terrance.
And I'm Sandy.
And today we're going to be talking about family vacations. But before we get into that, please remember to follow the Lunch with Sandy podcast on your favorite podcasting app. Also, be sure to follow us on social media at Lunch with Sandy. Sandy.
Yes.
What it do, what it be?
Oh, you know.
You a little tired from your partying last night?
It was just a very rough week this week.
Sometimes
Yeah.
you have to go through those rough weeks.
Yeah.
You know, the funny thing is, it always seems like after you go on a vacation,
It's the worst.
the week when you get back, it's a very rough week.
Yeah. And then my personal experience of getting sick from coming back from vacation, I should say, and then getting sick, it really, really put me behind.
But listen, you know, the opposite or the alternative to getting sick when you come back, it's getting sick while you're on vacation.
Oh, yeah, that's that. I'd always prefer to get sick.
And it seems
after
like
my vacation than during.
Vacations are, well, it depends on what the vacation and where it is, because we both got sick. Now, the sickness that I got, I was sick in January, and the doctor thought that everything was cool. But on vacation, I was good.
Yeah.
I had no problems while I was on vacation. The challenge was coming back to that 23 degree weather. And that weather just hit me in the chest. And it said, welcome home.
So, yeah, right. I know. For me, it was the opposite. I did not feel well on vacation. You know, the worst migraine I had had in a very long time. And it just lingered all vacation. But at least it wasn't to where I was sick in bed and couldn't function. You know, I got that when I came home.
Yeah, well, it was a welcome home present.
Yeah.
Rhode Island said,
here you go.
We missed you. Welcome home. And now that you're here, take this.
Oh, no, I was thinking it was more of a Florida present. Like, don't forget about us. Here you go.
I mean, don't say that, because I gotta go back in June. I think part of it too is, you know, you got to keep. Well, I don't know if you remember this or if you recall this. Here's what I'm thinking: on the flight back, there were two kids behind us.
Yeah,
and one of them kept coughing and not covering his mouth.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, and I think this is why I'll probably always wear a mask while on a plane going forward. Because it's not like we don't know that it's just an incubator of germs while you're on it. So, like, why am I not doing it? Because honestly, it's been twice since I've gotten sick from flying to Florida.
Well, you want to know what's funny? So I got back. I had to go to the doctor. And, you know, the doctor's assistant, it's funny because they were in Florida the exact same time we were. Difference is we came back on Friday. They came back on Monday. And she said the whole time her kids was fine. Got back on Monday. Her kids go to school. Boom. Instantly.
They're sick.
They're sick.
Well, honestly, even on the flight down there, I was like, maybe I should have worn a mask. Because they were, right, so on the flight down, we sat towards the back of the plane.
Yeah, we had no choice, but yeah.
Right, but all I could hear is like the coughing, the sneezing, like just everything. And I'm like, oh, great. Like, this is just room for disaster. But the flight coming home, we were towards the front of the plane, so all that coughing and everything was happening behind us. With the flight down, it was in front of us. So, yeah, I wouldn't.
Yeah. Well, enough about the downside,
The downside
of vacation. We had a great vacation.
We did.
It was one of those vacations where I think that we might have did more than we said we originally were going to do, but it still turned out to be a pretty good vacation. And we learned something this vacation, unfortunately. We learned that Aila is not really big into vacationing when it's just us anymore.
Yeah, I know.
She's
right?
at that age now where it's like,
Well, and I went into this vacation not knowing how it was going to go because, we had 2 extra individuals with us that we've never vacationed with before.
Yeah, but I knew that wasn't going to be a problem.
But, we all get along fine, but having family dinners and just hanging out is much different than vacationing with people.
That's true.
I was like, you just never know how well you're going to mesh during vacation. So I was like, I think we'll be all right, but just never know what you're in for. But it turned out actually to be wonderful.
You want to know the funny thing is our vacation game has definitely grown since the early days. And it's funny you talk about, not knowing how things are going to go. I think when we look back and we start talking about vacations and how we do it now, there are different phases or different things that you can do to make sure that you have an enjoyable experience when you go on vacation. And I think the biggest part of that, or the biggest thing that you can do to make sure that you have a good time, is planning for the vacation. And when I say planning for the vacation, I'm not talking about planning what you're going to do once you're down there.
Yeah.
I'm talking about getting your mind right, getting everything set up so when the time comes, it's just go.
Yeah. Well, and, I think practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
Learn from
we've
your
had a lot of practice.
Yes, we've had a lot of practice. Learn from your mistakes.
Absolutely.
And I think the other one is, just kind of know what stage you're at and like what your family needs to make it a successful trip.
Yeah.
Is that multiple naps? I don't know. Just like you just have to like figure out like what's going to make everybody happy.
You just said something right now.
Multiple naps.
And exactly. The multiple naps threw me for a loop because our youngest is 14. Well, our youngest is going to be 14. And I'm like, multiple naps? Who is she talking about? So
I'm talking about me. I need the multiple naps.
I think they're in the past, I think we've done a very good job for the most part when we start talking about vacationing. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about from where to go.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you decide to go on a vacation, where you're going plays a big role in that.
Definitely.
But you know what also plays a big role? When you go.
Yes. Yes.
So if you choose to go to a place for your vacation, and it is a high value place. And when I say high value, I mean, there are going to be a lot of people who are going to be at this spot because it's one of those spots. You got to be very careful when you go. Yeah. You got to plan to go during the non-peak seasons because
unless you like being around all those people.
Well, I mean, the thing about it is people can be very, very stressful. Mm-hmm, and when you have a lot of them around, I think it detracts from your vacation.
Yeah.
And I think everyone's vacation is a little different. Everyone's idea of what an ideal vacation is a little different. But when you look at, let's take the last vacation out. Let's look at one of the places we used to go all the time was Split Rock.
Yep.
We've gone to Split Rock during peak season.
Yep. And
we've gone during off season.
Yeah.
And the off season always is better. And Split Rock is not one of those places where you get an enormous amount of people, but you do get, a lot of people during their peak season. The experience that you get when it is off season is so much more relaxing because you have a lot more stuff to yourself. right? You're not vying for position, whether it be at the indoor water slides, whether it be at the the archery range or whatever.
Yeah, wait time and line time is just shorter. The ice cream shop, you might have a couple of people in front of you. It's not like a line out the door.
Yeah. And the other thing that I said we've stepped our vacation game up. A lot of vacations we used to go on, we used to drive. Now, when you're driving on a vacation, there are some things that you need to factor in, or you need to take into account, or you need to consider in order for that drive
Lots
to
of
be
patience.
to be less stressful. And I think one of the biggest things is when you're going to leave. Again, it's hard to predict what traffic is going to be like in certain. Well, let me take a step back. Now it's much easier to predict what traffic is going to be like in areas that you don't normally travel in.
Yes.
But when the kids were younger, the older kids, when they were younger, and we would go on vacations, you get your map, you print it out because GPS wasn't readily available for everyone, and you would be at the mercy of whatever traffic you came upon. So when you left or when you decided to leave was very important.
Yeah.
Because that's how you would avoid traffic in specific areas. So
in which way you would go? Because back then we used to do more of like the scenic, non-traffic routes.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Just because we knew if we get stuck in that traffic, who wants to spend so much time driving in the car if they don't have to? So we used to, take a little longer, go more the scenic route, but knowing that it really wasn't going to be impacted by traffic.
Yeah, and that planning that route and that scenic route helped us tremendously, because when you plan that route, when we used to plan that route, we knew what everyone's preference was. We knew where we'd be stopping. Yes. And so the kids would look forward to, all right, well, we know we ain't getting out of the car here. Yeah. Right? When we get here, we're gonna stop and we'll go do this. And and now,
wasn't it like the Pennsylvania Welcome Center?
It was the Welcome Center.
That was their stop.
that was their stop. I mean, I would like to drive until we got to the Welcome Center, but then we would always stop, depending on the route that we would go. We would stop and obviously use the bathroom.
Yep.
And then eventually, we actually had to switch up that route. But when you can plan that route, right, and then you can schedule where you're going to actually have breaks at, it does break the trip up. It gives the kids who are always in the back seat, are we there yet? It gives them an idea of,
like a milestone.
Exactly when we're going to stop, what we're actually going to do when we stop. And you said this earlier, when you're doing a road trip, you got to have patience, because again, you can't predict all the traffic that you're going to hit.
You can't predict just everything, like the black bear that ran in front of our car that one time. And we're like, wow.
That was a situation where the kids were asleep, but at the same time,
there's just a lot of things that you just can't predict, and you have to be patient and just figure out how to handle.
What I will say is, and this is from I don't know if it was the last New Hampshire trip. No, it wasn't the last one, the one before. You need to pack an emergency or a preparedness kit. Yeah. And when I say a preparedness kit, listen, you never know what's going to happen. Just be prepared. Have some plastic bags back there, some towels, some wipes, all of that stuff, because as we've learned, the road trips that we've been doing lately have involved meeting up with other families. And you know what happens when kids get together? It's like
bugs.
a petri dish of just germs.
Yeah.
And it always seems like the germs actually hit when we're coming back.
Yeah.
So in New Hampshire, the last day, Aila gets sick.
Oh, yeah, poor thing.
Yes, and she's throwing up just before we leave. Then she's throwing up in the car. So being prepared, which we wasn't for that trip.
We were not.
Being prepared.
Lesson learned with that one.
Yeah. The thing with those road trips, and we're going to go back to the Pennsylvania ones, is it's one thing to prepare for the route and the stops and the things like that. But sometimes just getting out the house was a challenge. Between getting everyone's luggage, getting it in the car. If you remember when Lexi and Shayna was young, just getting all the stuff in the car was a challenge.
I'd take it even a step back and just even packing because for the most part, I was the one that was packing for all of us.
I packed my own stuff.
Well, minus you, but it was Lexi, myself, Shayna.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm always packing for everybody.
Well, if you would have taught them to pack for themselves, we probably wouldn't have had room to fit all their stuff anyway.
I know, I'm trying to teach Aila, and yet I'm still like,
Well, the whole packing thing, too, is there's always a situation where, okay, did I forget anything?
Yeah.
Is there something there's two things. Did I forget to pack something? Mm-hmm. And did I leave something?
Yes.
Because Daddy.
Mm-hmm.
Daddy's rule is whatever time we're leaving, AIS, ass in seat.
Yeah.
That's the time we pull. And if you leave something, you better deal with that.
Well, I feel like we've been more flexible, I'll say. Like, I think we used to stress more about, oh my God, did we leave something? Did we forget to pack something?
Yeah.
Unless it's the necessities, like park tickets, if you have them in paper or whatever it is, Other than that, I feel like now we're like, we'll just get it when we get down there.
Yes, that's true. Well, I mean, part of that too is, again, when you look at the trips we're taking now.
Yeah, it's not worth the stress. We'll figure it out when we get there.
Well, wisdom comes with age. Mm-hmm. And as you get older, you figure out there are certain things that just aren't worth worrying about.
Right.
You know what I mean? Look, if you forget
toothpaste,
exactly, if you forget your toothpaste, just go buy some toothpaste. Because think about it. We went to Italy last year.
Yeah.
And they lost our bags for a couple days. Now, we didn't
Almost
forget anything.
A week.
Yeah. Well, we didn't forget anything.
Yeah.
But guess what? We had to go buy toothpaste. We had to go buy all that stuff.
Yeah.
And we could have stressed about it.
Yeah.
But what was that going to do?
No, exactly.
It was only going to detract from the trip.
Yeah.
So
surprisingly, we didn't. I was irritated, and I wasn't stressed by it because once that first night, I had a nice tube of toothpaste and a toothbrush to clean my teeth. It was like,
Exactly. Do you remember the last road trip we took with all the girls?
That was fun.
Yeah, I remember. It was the Virginia trip.
It actually wasn't bad. It was just the traffic coming home.
So, well, the traffic coming home was bad, but if you remember the ride down. Now you got to remember, Lexi and Shayna always had this thing when they're in the car.
Oh, yeah. Don't touch me. Don't talk to me. It was just, yeah.
Yes, and so space with them was always an issue. And in that last trip, it was
especially the touching. You're too close to me. Move over.
Because that last trip, I think
they were all in the back seat.
They were all in the back seat, and I think at some point they figured that this whole thing would end. But then Aila comes along. And now you have three in the back seat again, and so the space is limited. And now they're back in this whole, oh, she's on my side, and I don't want to sit in the middle, and this. It was just. Mm-hmm. Don't
make me turn this car around.
Exactly. Listen. It's so funny that that phrase became just such a phrase for everything. Don't make me turn this car around. I'll do it. But I think in order to survive a trip like that, and we don't do too many road trips anymore.
No.
Which again, I don't have an issue with, although we got to hit Split Rock again. But I think the thing that we probably could have done a better job at was setting the expectation. And I think we did that with our actions, like making those stops, the same stops, but at the same time, using our words to say, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. This is where we're going to stop. Mm-hmm. This is how I want you to sit. I don't want to hear anything about this. You know what I mean? And then at the same time, you know, when we weren't as calm of parents back then as we are now, because the way we dealt with the conflicts and disagreements was just straight, listen, don't make me come back there.
So two thoughts. One is, you're right. Like, we always included the kids in planning the vacation, but we didn't talk much about, like, en route to the vacation spot. So we probably didn't kind of set those expectations and talk enough about that. And I feel like that would have helped them. The other thing is, it just makes me laugh because I think you're right. We definitely did not have the same patience, in which even this particular trip where I just remember the looks that Alexi and Shayna were giving Aila about, I could never get away with that.
You know, the thing about it is we're different now. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to say how we're different. So right now as parents, right now as parents, we use a lot more humor to diffuse situations. Yeah. We are much more lenient from the perspective of the looks that we give, the tone in the voice, in our voice, and we do a lot more talking. And when I say talking, I mean having a conversation of a collaborative, from the collaborative perspective, to deal with the situations where we would yell and scream. Where we would yell and scream in the past.
Well, you know, she is also the last one, so I think you just learn, right? Like, this stuff isn't that big of a deal. Like, like the kids are going to turn out fine if we don't do blank.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah.
Going back to the last road trip, there was a couple things that I learned. Well, that hopefully that the kids learned, and I knew this. If you remember, so we went down to Virginia, and again, when you start to go south, it tends to be a lot warmer than it is when you're up north.
Yeah.
And so from the perspective of being prepared from the dress perspective, you know, particularly when you're in the car, you want to dress comfortably, but at the same time, you got to be prepared because when you go down, it's warmer. When you come back, it might not be. But at the same time, too, it's not always about the weather. Going down, we didn't have any issues. Coming back, we were in that car for a very, very long time.
Yes, we were.
That was the trip that made me say I'm never driving to Virginia again.
Well, yeah. We should have left at like 1 a.m. We would have been fine.
That, and the other part about that too is we should have told them, all right, listen, after a certain amount of time, we're gonna stop and switch seats so we ain't got to deal with the she's on my side or she's too close to me and all those other things. So for all those people out there, when you start talking about these road trips, you know, there's a couple things that we mentioned, right? We talked about being prepared, making sure you have that emergency prepared kit, making sure your kids dress comfortably, and at the same time, you got to switch that seating up depending on who you got. If it's just one back there, that's fine. But if you got 3 back there.
Yeah. Right. Well, too. And the other thing is, like, you know, like you said, planning out the commute and whatnot. You know, that road trip, we let the girls probably sleep in. We left later, like not abundantly late, but it was later. Yeah. You know, had we. Because you want them to sleep in the car anyhow. Yeah. So if we had left much earlier, we probably missed out on a lot of that traffic that we got hit.
We definitely would. Because if you remember.
Because honestly, I rather do any road trip where I know that any kid that is in the backseat is going to be sleeping. It makes it so much better.
Yeah. If you remember that trip, we got to exit 1 in Connecticut at 12 p.m. Mm-hmm. We got home at 5.
I know.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
That's like 2.5, 3 hours longer than it should have actually taken us.
Yeah.
And that traffic was ridiculous.
It was.
But.
You know what? Another thing we should have learned, we should have just pulled off the highway, went and, I don't know.
Well, if you remember, we pulled off and got gas.
Well, we did that, but
and that made it longer because of getting back on.
But I mean, like, we could have, I guess, like, waited it out a little bit, found something to do. I don't know. Even just called it a day, booked a hotel, and just spent the night.
Yeah. Well,
and said, you know what, we'll deal with this in the morning.
Yeah, and then, so the biggest difference between now and then, like, all of the accessories that are available today weren't available back then.
Correct.
So when you start talking about surviving that trip, I mean, for the parents, it's just, all right, well, you got to suck it up. But for the kids, it was horrible because I think we might have had the little DVD things that they can play, but there were no iPads. There were no, Kindles or what is the Fires and all that other stuff.
The Fires.
Well, it's the Kindle Fire there's no tablets. Listen, so they didn't have tablets. So in today, what you could do is
the little Nintendo DSs and the DVD players.
Yeah,
that was it.
Well, and you know what? Actually, they did have something, but today there are many more options that would help survive a actual ride like this. Not much for the parents. The parents got to suck it up and just enjoy the view of the traffic if you get caught into it, right? But with kids, you can have their tablets, books, or whatever. But you really should plan ahead of time to make sure that if there's something from the perspective of like movies or whatever that you need to download first, you get that stuff done first. And so in a situation where your car ride is longer than you expect, now you got something to entertain them a little bit. What we used to do back in the day.
I think we're going to go down the same route. And I was going to say, I think the ideal situation would be what we used to do was probably starting off with some of the games that we used to play in the car.
Yes.
And then having like the electronics for when they start getting bored.
Yeah, and I think depending on the kids, that'll work. I mean, I would always start with some of the games used to play in the car. And what I mean, like, the license plate game and all those other things. The question becomes whether or not kids today would be willing to get into that. And I think a lot of them would because it's different. But I think that with the accessibility of all these different devices, the social aspect of what kids were then and what they are now have actually changed. And I don't want to spend too much time on that. But I think, besides doing or having all those devices and playing those games, and we didn't, well, actually, no, we used to do this. I think if you allow for a period of time, and obviously with kids nowadays, it can't be too long, but if you allow for a period of quiet time, while you're in the car.
We used to play the quiet game.
Listen, I know we used to play the quiet game all the time.
I'm pretty sure Shayna always lost.
Oh, yeah, Shayna lost all the time. Shayna would lose all the time. I mean, even we used to play with Aila, and Aila would lose all the time. But if you allow for quiet time, that's one way that the parents actually can get a little break and survive a little easier.
That's why
in one of those
kids
situations.
are sleeping out of the ideal situation. I think if we were to go on a road trip today, obviously our kids are younger, but if we had to go on a road trip with younger kids, it would be, let's drive at 4:00 in the morning so they can just sleep.
Well, you know what? I think today I know for a fact today that we're much more different, right? So if we were to go on a road trip today, we would know that everything's not going to go according to plan.
Right.
Just from history, just from our experience.
Yep.
And I think that we will be much more open. Like back then, I wasn't open to no sightseeing and no detouring. Nah, I need to get where I need to go. Mm-hmm. We would be much more open to sightseeing and those things. So that'd be a little bit different. Like we're at that stage now where we understand that time is one of the only things that, we can't get back. And so if you have the opportunity to go see something or explore something, let's go do it.
Right. Like, hey, we're stuck in traffic. I think the Connecticut situation was unusual because I don't think we really thought at some point, well, I should say we probably did think at some point this traffic has to alleviate, and it just didn't.
It just didn't, and it didn't.
So right, so like, okay, well, what's around us? Like to your point, we have so many options for technology. Like, just pull up a map.
Yeah.
What's near us that, something we'd like to do just to get us out of the car, do something. And then we'll finish attacking this drive home. But yeah, I think flexibility, and going with the flow is such a big part of it, keeping everybody sane and happy.
Yeah, and I think now we look at it different, right? I think now we look at, okay, all of it as it's quality time together.
Yeah.
As opposed to, we're going here, we're going to do this, but getting there and coming back is not part of it.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's a big adjustment in our mindset. I think now we more look at it from the perspective of the journey is just as important as the destination.
Yes.
The experiences that you have getting there are only going to enhance the experience that you have while there, and vice versa on the way coming back. If you have that mindset, then your vacation is not just when you get to wherever it is you're going and then that's it. It's you start going down there. Your mindset is different. You understand that, hey, some things may happen. Kumbaya. We're going to deal with it whatever way we can actually deal with it and just keep it moving. And I know for a fact, I was not like that when we were going on vacation with the girls.
I was definitely much more uptight and not flexible. Now, like, think about it. When we did the trip to Portugal, we brought like a deck of cards, and all of us were playing cards while we were waiting in the airport. Like, to your point, it's part of the vacation. So there's no need to just put yourself consistently on stressful situations. Like, just enjoy your time together. And
this, the thing, people need to get out and see the world. And I'm going to say why I'm saying that, because that trip to Portugal, that's when we started to change our mindset. The first one, that's when we started to change our mindset. We brought those cards partially because we knew that in certain places we weren't going to have access to the internet. And so we were going to have to find ways to actually entertain ourselves. And when you start thinking about how we actually interacted as a family on the trip there, because it was such a long time to get there, while we were there in those places that didn't have internet. If you recall, as soon as we got to a place where we had internet,
everybody was kind of like
off on their own, except for when we were in Albufeira, because there was so much going on.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Yeah. That was so much of a touristy place, and they had all the shops. They had the nightclub scene that the girls went to. So when you have things like that in a place where you haven't been before and it's so vibrant, that can actually draw your attention.
Yeah.
But the other places, I remember when we got to your mom's place and she had that little wireless thing, and all of a sudden we're all watching movies on our phones. Because in that place now, again, the difference between that place and the other places, there wasn't a lot to do around there. Yeah. And we went for a lot of walks. We went to the cafe. We did all that stuff, which was part of our experience. But as nightfall came around, there was nothing to do. You don't get no TV. You don't get no TV stations or anything over there. So, but I think that trip really started us to start looking at things a little different. So when people plan these trips, or people are planning vacations, planning the trip is one thing, and there's some things that you want to take into consideration. But I think that, if you can make the entirety of the journey part of the vacation, you're going to get a much more better experience out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, agreed. Like, you really have to just plan that accordingly too. Like, because the worst thing, I think, is, especially when you're flying, right? Getting all uptight, getting, to the airport too late, running around and things of that nature. Not that we ever really did that, but I feel like that adds so much stress and pressure to it. So you just have to recognize, like, if I don't want that in my trip, then whatever, I'm going to get to the airport maybe even an hour earlier than I really need to be. And you know what? That's fine. Let's just sit around and play some card games while we're waiting.
Yeah, and that's what we got to start doing, because again, if you make it, you said it, if you make that part of your plan, then the expectation is, okay, this is what we're actually doing here. The one thing that we got to figure out is this, and I've said this, Aila don't want a vacation with us no more.
Oh, I know. She wanted to just be with her sisters.
Yeah. And I think part of that too is, I think that from a planning perspective and from a, an inclusivity perspective, we got to start having conversations with her and saying, okay, well, what do you want to do here? Or what's your interest in here? Because again, she was gung-ho with having her sisters there.
Yeah.
She was also gung-ho about having some other people there. And I think that when that didn't happen, it was kind of like,
Yeah. Well, and it was cute because I think the girls recognized that with Aila too. And they also recognize, like, we need to make more of an effort to include her and do things with her, because she is at that age where she does want to hang out with them and not mom and dad. It's very sad and depressing.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not going to say that it's...
I'm kidding about the sad and depressing, but it is just like, oh,
no, I mean, it's
up.
one of those things where, I'm mindful of the fact that, okay, well, her interests are shifting, and, you always wish you can hold on a little longer.
Yeah.
But that's why I say we have to take advantage of the opportunities that are actually presented to us and make sure that we take full advantage, or take advantage to the full extent that we can. Because again, eventually... they grow up and then they're gone. Well, gone out of the house.
Right. People say it all the time that time flies. And I think for us, it's like, it, but then when it happens, it's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Like, I can't believe that much time has actually already elapsed.
She's going to be 14 in a couple of weeks.
I know, exactly.
And speaking...
So you're like, you know what? There's just... stressors and things that just are not worth our time and attention anymore.
And speaking of, we were at a particular store yesterday, and she made it clear what she wants for her birthday.
She mentioned that to me today when I got home.
And I'm of the mindset now that, you know what? Regardless of what's going to happen in a year or 2 years, we have to decide if we want to take the leap and do what she's asking. And I've been actually, I got a plan, and let's wrap this up, because I'm going to tell you what my plan is afterwards. But in short, vacations are a great thing, but family trips, they can be a chaotic experience. But when you plan and you take into account where you're going, when you're leaving, and all those things, that stuff can enhance your overall experience. And now it takes the vacation from, okay, well, once you arrive at your destination and once you leave your destination, to, okay, well, as soon as our journey begins, our experience begins, and we're going to enjoy this trip the whole way. Sometimes the journey should be the destination, and having the ability to share that experience in the time with your loved ones fuels that journey. So embrace the twists and turns and unexpected detours, as it is those experiences that forge memories that are cherished forever. Thank you for joining us on the Lunch with Sandy podcast. Please be sure to follow us and leave feedback on your favorite podcasting app, as well as social media. Until next time, stay well.
That's it for this week's episode of the Lunch with Sandy podcast. Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear your feedback and comments on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Lunch with Sandy. And be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast app. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to rate and review us. Thanks again for listening to the Lunch with Sandy podcast.